Good to
Thank
see you,
you
Shivon.
so much for being here today and for supporting Canadian AI. As you can see, you are not the only one.
Very exciting. Great to see everyone here. This is a great opportunity to talk about everything we've been doing, but mostly all the exciting things to come. And I know everyone here is a big part of that, so it's great to be here.
Awesome. So a bit of context to start. This is the third year we've done this conference. Ajay and I had felt very lonely thinking about AI in our little corner for a while, and in 2015 we decided to give it a shot, see if we could get a room together, and I gotta say it was pretty lonely. We had to pull teeth to get people here the first time speakers. It was December, actually, right after you got elected, and we offered, people were like, oh, it's Canada, it's cold, why do we have to do this AI thing, why do we have to do it in Toronto? And, I offered out bottles of brown liquor to keep people warm and offered to name my firstborn child after a speaker to come and keynote. So I do have to make good on that one day. But, Ajay and I were remarking on the fact that we had to convince people to think about this. And now, especially since you got elected, you can't help but be bombarded by AI left, right, and center. So I wanted to start by going back a little bit, though. Ajay and I were talking about, when was the first time that we really started thinking about artificial intelligence? And so I wanted to ask you the same question. When was that, and what were you thinking about?
I think I got into it through sci-fi, like most of us did, whether it was Asimov's 3 Rules of Robotics or looking at watching war games and thinking about global thermonuclear war versus a nice game of chess.
Healthy thing for 6-year-old,
it was just getting a sense of computers that would be smart. I mean, that was the big thing about war games, right? Yeah. Where we taught the computer to learn, and I thought, that's really, really interesting. And I remember as a kid playing chess on my Mac in the 80s, and there was a degree of difficulty setting that you'd actually set based on how much time you let the computer compute. And it was, in my vision of it anyway, it was allowing the computer to go deeper and deeper into all the different possible decision trees, all the different moves that it could make, and to figure out the very best one. If you give it just 1 second or 5 seconds or 10 seconds, it would go a lot deeper and get a much more difficult or advanced moves. And that was sort of me thinking about, whereas I was never a very good chess player, but my moves were 2 steps. 1, look if I'm in immediate or imminent danger anywhere on the board, and then go with my gut. And like I said, never a very good chess player. But now to see how things have evolved into computers because of the work of Jeff Hinton and others on deep learning, doing that gut step a little more tangibly than just what is the perfect logical step is amazingly exciting, but also challenging for us to think about in an ethical and moral frame, but also as a legislator and as someone who's trying to build a frame for us to succeed in a safe and fair world. There's a little too much black box thinking in there for us to be totally comfortable with it.
So I hear you're an expert in quantum computing. Given that, these neural networks, deep learning was kind of pioneered very close to here, Canadians are being forced to figure out what artificial intelligence is, what neural networks are. I was hoping you'd give us a little bit of a primer.
Okay, like anyone in this room knows more about AI than I do. But for me, it's understanding that a computer can make in a video game or in a simulation, massive numbers of experiments to try, well, if I do this, what result do I get? Okay, if I do that, what result do we get? Whether it's solving a problem or following a car down a road or whatever it is, computers are allowed to experiment basically so much faster than anyone can. I mean, a doctor will see many thousands of patients over the course of their career and develop an extraordinary level to analyze and understand what's wrong with someone, but a computer can do that many tests and simulations in a few minutes or in seconds, and there's a capacity to accumulate data and experimental paths. And that's sort of the machine learning element of AI, where you try all sorts of different things and figure out what works and what doesn't. And for simple things, that's reasonably effective. But where, I feel like I'm getting a test here. But where,
good news, you're passing so far.
What's really exciting is taking that step that simulates a little more the way the brain works, where we don't work in perfectly linear algorithms in our head, logical steps. We make leaps of intuition, leaps of analysis based on experiences, based on. I think about it in terms of what I studied in university, which was poetry, and trying to explain why a poet wrote a particular line. And you'd get really into analyzing, did he mean death? Was he talking about his mother in there? And you could go back and take an interview with the poet who'd say, no, I didn't mean any of those things. You're completely wrong. But the poet could be wrong because maybe they didn't know what they were packaging into that line. They just knew that line felt right. It was the right message for them on an intuitive, on an artistic level. And therefore, there's always more to be hidden in there. So mimicking that leap of intuition, of patterns with forward loops and then recursive loops as we're starting to develop within those hidden layers is really, really exciting. But also, as I mentioned, lends us to a place where maybe the computer can't justify the decision it's taking, or we can't explain why a particular decision was taken. Take the example of self-driving cars that everyone's thinking about now. If you're stuck in an emergency situation and you have to choose between veering into oncoming traffic or risking to hit the little girl that ran out into the street after the ball, you're going to struggle, and you're going to make one decision. And then if 10 minutes later the police officer is grilling you on why you made that decision, you won't maybe know it was instinct. Will you be held accountable for it? Probably not, if it was a reasonable decision that anyone in a high-stress situation would make. Well, self-driving cars will have to make the same kinds of decisions. What is going to be our expectations of what is the right decision? And how accountable are they for the right decision? And how did they come to that right decision? Can we check every step of the program to see that they came to the right decision? Can we charge the programmer, or can we charge the coder that missed out a line of code? Or do we say, no, the computer made a leap of judgment? Well, that's something that's challenging for us to try and figure out how to think around in a legal, moral, ethical framework. And all I can say is, I'm glad we're having the reflections around AI here in a country where we have a Charter of Rights and Freedoms, where we have a decent ethical and moral frame to think about these consequences in these contexts and the benefits of diversity and all the things that we do well in Canada, because there's some parts of the world where those decisions wouldn't be as top of mind, and I'm glad we're having this conference here today.
So do you think AI will ever be a poet? Or one that
maybe poetry consumed by other AIs.
Oh. We just got deep. Very
Was it do androids dream of sheep? What is it?
Electric sheep. Yeah.
Electric sheep. I've got the Blade Runner reboot on my mind right now.
Amazing.
Electric sheep.
Let's, we were chatting a little bit earlier. One of the reasons I'm so passionate about AI in Canada in particular is, as you know, as everyone in this room knows, I'm a very biased super Canadian. And so one of the things, especially being in Silicon Valley, if I talk to my friends, a lot of our brains are there because it's really exciting, but our hearts are in Canada, right? And part of the reason for that is there's this beautiful moral compass that exists here. And, as AIs become more human, as they touch society more, I really hope a lot of that happens here. And so let's delve into a little bit of what does the future of AI look like in Canada. Let's start a little bit with research. And so Canada started out with this great advantage of CFAR during the AI winter, putting in a lot of research funding. A lot of the pioneering work, Jeff Hinton, we've got Rich Sutton in the room today, has been done in Canada. As of about 2 years ago, there were some criticisms that, hey, Canada didn't wake up to this. The U.S. woke up to it first. A lot of that talent's leaving. Ajay and I had a conversation a year and a half ago. We're like, is it too late? And to Canada's credit, we've fought back really, really hard. And so what do you think the state of AI research is in Canada, and where do you think we need to take it?
Oh, I think first of all, I mean, I'm glad it's not being asked here, but there is a question out there. Is automation good? Is AI good? Is it something we need to move forward with, or is it something we need to try and resist because it's going to be tremendously disruptive to our world, our economy, our jobs as it stands? I think we all understand, certainly in this room, that this is the way the world is going. So let's be part of it, and let's help shape it, and let's make sure that we're benefiting from the innovations, both the designing of them and the applications and the jobs that are going to come through it. So there's no question for me that Canada, for all our natural resources, our greatest resource has always been the human resources that figured out how to get those natural resources to markets and success, but now more and more are creating solutions for our everyday lives, investing in people, investing in research, investing in the quality of life that people get. I mean, I hear Silicon Valley is getting very expensive and crowded, and a lot of people, I mean, the number of stories of people who are coming back to Canada. I was talking with Mark from Vidyard a few months ago saying, you know what, that it used to be that it was very much, heading down there. Now, a lot more people are coming back. A lot of capital from there is coming here because they're realizing that, the clusters we have are really exciting. And yes, we have big companies, the big giants, still buying, Canadian startups. But instead of sucking them down to their center of gravity south, more and more they're leaving them here and allowing them to flourish in what is a great ecosystem here. So our focus is on making sure, yes, we're investing in the science, whether it's superclusters, whether it's the AI initiative that we've invested $125 million in, making sure we're successfully drawing in investors who want to set up shop, whether it's Microsoft looking at the Cascadia corridor in Vancouver, whether it's the big announcement we made with Joël Pinot at Facebook in Montreal, whether it's the Alphabet waterfront project we just did here in Toronto, or examples of all of those companies, or Amazon maybe coming to Canada as well. On top of the $1 billion or $2 they already have in Canada. There's a lot of big interest there, but we also know they're coming up here not just because rent is cheaper than in Silicon Valley. They're coming up here because we have an extraordinary pipeline of STEM graduates that we do need to do better on. We have a diversity that makes it easier to go global at a time where some countries, although I can't think of any examples right now, seem to be closing in and pushing away immigrants. We recognize that it's extraordinarily valuable to welcome in people and give them the tools to work. Actually, when I was down at a conference in the U.S. About a year and a half ago, I was talking to a number of people, including Reed Hastings from LinkedIn, and he basically said, look, if you could make it easier for us to bring in top talent from around the world to help run our offices, we'll hire as many Canadian young engineers and graduates as we can possibly find, because we want to do more and more and more. And that's true across the tech sector. So yes, there's a certain amount of bringing in big American companies, but there's also creating those successes here and allowing those successes and those young people and those startups to develop the next platform, the next Nortel or BlackBerry, hopefully with a happier ending on those. But we know we're capable of building those frames. How do we create the ecosystem and, quite frankly, the quality of life around it? Yes, we'll always have winter, but that means you learn how to hug and
why we have more empathy.
And the quality of life is what a lot of young people looking to succeed in the world and eventually start a family and build a good life. It's not just about the rat race anymore, and it's about living in a great place that reflects your values and that you want to eventually build a family in and build a better success for your neighborhood. And that's a place that Canada has a lot to offer on.
We definitely win there. I did want to ask you a little bit about the point you're just talking about, which is the tech giants really taking notice of Canada. Obviously we saw DeepMind come in. Edmonton and Montreal are now places like Untitled Labs. Facebook, you mentioned. Someone made an off-color joke to me in Silicon Valley being like, oh, Google just bought your country. And I was like, no, it didn't happen. Nothing against Google, but like, nobody buy my country, please. How do you think about that balance between, again, these tech giants coming in, but then also nurturing local innovation? Not that there's like a one-to-one trade-off between those two things, but you do have to be thoughtful about it, right? So how are you thinking through that challenge?
Well, you got to think about it on a couple of different levels. One is sort of the clusters are always spinning up. Someone works for Google for a few years and gets a great idea and decides, I don't want Google to own it. I'm going to develop it on my own and sort of sneak out the back door and start up a little company that then hires others. And I mean, we saw this a lot when I was living in Vancouver in the late 90s in the video game industry around EA, where there were lots of little exciting startups that got really innovative. And you can create a cluster of ecosystems that really end up spreading and supporting an awful lot of very exciting innovation and advances. At the same time, the number of top folks for multinationals, whether it's in the tech world or elsewhere, who I've met who of like, I came up, sent up from the head office here to Montreal, and I'm staying. I started my family here, and we're now Canadian, and we're going to stay here for the rest of our lives. It's this idea that if people have a choice, they'd rather live in a place that is nice and accepting and where diversity is celebrated, where they reflect their values in a way that works. And it's not always about how do we, absolutely maximize the economic benefits, because what we're seeing now is the quality of life benefits combined with very, very strong economic outcomes is something that people are totally looking at. So I'm very aware that we don't want, one of the challenges that Canada's always had was for many, many years through the 20th century, the big American companies with whom we were so closely integrated in so many ways would see Canada as a bit of a branch economy. So they'd have offices and things there, but they wouldn't do as much R&D. They wouldn't really create the high value propositions. It was just sort of an extension or a satellite. And what we need to get away from is the idea that, it's just another market the size of California. Instead, we need to say, okay, this is a place where exciting things happen that if our company wants to be successful on the global stage, we want to be part of. We need to be part of, because that's where really exciting innovation is happening. That's where people are really thinking about how the world should work, what society could look like 50 years from now, a couple hundred years from now, when we no longer fear differences and we understand that working together is a much better way of solving our challenges rather than pointing and blame and being scared of each other. That's where the world's going to eventually have to go, and I think Canada has a very important story and a very important role to play in shaping that future. I think a lot of people get that. So I'm welcoming people to come here because they're going to find that hiring Canadians and creating success here is a great way to benefit both their country, the companies, and the world.
Awesome. So speaking about Canadian successes, this is something that came up briefly the last time we chatted. You mentioned tall poppy syndrome, which is an interesting term because it exists in Canada, and I looked it up, basically across the Commonwealth, but no one knows what it means in the United States. It's kind of antithetical to, for example, the Silicon Valley ideal, which is like, go forth, be superior, go do your thing, be the best. When we think about AI, there's actually a new market dynamic that comes up, which is we're seeing winner-take-all type environments, right? And it's because once you have the data, you create the product, you deliver that product to the customers, those customers deliver valuable data back, your algorithms get better. It's this vicious or virtuous cycle, depending on how you want to categorize it.
Yeah, I'm busy reading Scott Galloway's The Four right now, which is, if anyone's read it, it's the story of how Amazon, Apple, Facebook and Google have become the extraordinary dominant companies they are. And
right.
I keep saying countries. It's a little bit Freudian.
That might have been a Freudian slip, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Everyone knows what a Freudian slip is. It's when you say one thing, but you mean your mother. Okay. It's better than my usual dad jokes, so that'll be good.
Wonderful. I need a minute after that. That was great. And so, one of the things that we're going to have to do is figure out how to double down on the things that even showed just a spark of, again, potentially being one of those next big four, and we're going to have to do it quickly. And that's going to be an interesting challenge for government, because government historically has been very evenly distributed to all the people, and we're entering an era where there will be massive economic prosperity by the winners in AI, but energy into them is very asymmetric. So,
well, that's why we've put such an emphasis in our government on growth for the middle class and trying to figure out how to make sure that the rising tide lifts all boats. And that's the real challenge. I mean, we have an economy now that rewards superstars with outsized payouts, and everyone else sort of is left out of the benefits of the extraordinary innovations that happen. And the fact is that's simply not sustainable. That's going to lead to angst, anxiety, jealousy, anger, class divisions, the pitchforks are coming, all those kinds of things that we know is simply not good for us as communities, as society, as a world. So what we're focused on in Canada is saying, okay, the deal was we'd create growth, and growth would be good for everyone. But there's a whole bunch of people who've said, wow, growth, offshoring, automation, robots, productivity gains, efficiencies, hasn't been good for me, hasn't been good for my family, is not going to create jobs for my kids and their future. And they're starting to want to pull their support away from a growth agenda. So we've been trying really hard over the past 2 years to try and reset that a bit. Despite what a lot of classic economists were telling us, we said, no, if we start putting more money directly into the pockets of the middle class, if we raise taxes on the wealthiest 1%, lower them on the middle class, if we support small businesses by lowering small business taxes, but we make sure that it's not a way for the wealthiest to pay less taxes. We do all these sorts of things that a lot of people are disagreeing with. We're going to create economic growth and confidence in society that will itself reassure people about the direction we're on. Because that element of confidence in the future is one of the best predictors of whether a society is going to make drastic decisions in the wrong direction that are not maybe as productive as they'd like it to be, being thoughtful about how I phrase this. But we need to have people realize that, yes, we're facing challenges, but if we work together, we can solve them in a way that everyone will benefit from. And that narrative, while less attractive perhaps than the competitive survival of the fittest Darwinian environment that the pressure cooker of Silicon Valley sometimes creates, I truly believe, and I think Canadians believe, that it would not be sustainable to be exacerbating that inequity and exacerbating the haves, the have-nots, the have-yots, and instead make sure that there is a path towards success for everyone. And that means investing in better education, more coding for elementary school students, better STEM programs for high school and university students, more skills and training opportunities for someone who's mid-career in their mid-40s and looking at the fact that perhaps they're going to be replaced by automation in the next 10 years, and they won't be able to have a good job to bring them towards retirement unless they do go back to school and get a little little more training and become more powerful users of the technology that surrounds us, those kinds of things, I think, are going to determine how and, quite frankly, whether we are successful as a civilization in the coming decades.
We're going to live up to that one, right?
We're doing it together.
Well, I wanted to thank you so much. All of Canadian AI thanks you for being here today. It's clearly going to be the most important technology that humanity has ever created. We need to make responsible decisions.
Fire was pretty good, but okay. Maybe it's the best one until the next one. The line I think about all the time is, the pace of change has never been this fast, but it'll never be this slow again.
Yes.
We're accelerating.
So we're going to end on a light note, which is we're doing a lightning round on AGI later, and one of the questions we have, so preview for all of you guys on that panel, is in what year will a human first marry a robot?
You know what? I have a suspicion it happened somewhere in Asia already.
Well, thank you so much, Prime Minister.
Thank you, everyone. Of course. Here, come on up. Your mic's on.
Can you hear me now? Perfect. Okay, we wanted to take, on behalf of the conference, thank you so much for being here. We wanted to give you a true tech startup style thank you by giving you a hoodie.
Excellent.
Your nerd passport, if you will, and also a pair of Creative Destruction Labs socks to add to your collection.
Looking at those.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.